Let's take a look at cubic right angle weave. This is a great stitch to use for designing, and there are a lot of projects that use this stitch. But it can be complicated and difficult for a lot of people, so let's see if there's an easier way to do this. If I was using regular right angle weave, this is a construction of the cube, and typically you create a bottom and then you use right angle weave to create the sides. So you're picking up 3 and then 2 and then 2 and then 1, and then you finally stitch up and you stitch around the top. That is certainly one way to do it. But if we take a look and deconstruct what's going on, we see that this stitching around the top, which then becomes the bottom for the next one, so each cube is stitched around the top and around the bottom, it in effect crosses over. So there's no reason to stay with right angle weave in terms of this construction. So let's take a look and see if we can find an easier way. So the first thing is that we have a bottom, and in this case we've already got it, but if I was starting fresh, I'd pick up 4 beads and stitch around to create the bottom. The next thing we're going to do is create one of the sides. So from the bottom, I'm going to pick up 3 beads, stitching around that bead to create one of my sides. Then I'm going to stitch over to the side opposite and repeat that, picking up 3 beads and stitching around to create. So now I've got my bottom and 2 sides, and I just need to complete this side and that side. So I can stitch through these 2 beads, pick up the top of this side, stitch over, and then repeat that. Stitch through those 2 beads, pick up the bead for the top, and stitch down through these 2 beads. So there's my cube, and I'm up and out. Now if I was using right angle weave, I would need to stitch around this top. But the way that we're constructing the sides, we're stitching around the bottom to create the sides. So in essence, once I've created this one, I've stitched around the top of the one beneath. So I don't need to stitch around as long as I'm adding the next cube. Adding the next cube will create that stitch. So that is one of the things that makes this faster. So I'm going to pick up 3, construct the side, stitch over to the side opposite, stitching around the bottom, pick up 3, create that side. Now I just have my last 2. So I go through those 2 beads, pick up 1, go through these 2, stitch around the bottom over to the side opposite, repeat that, pick up, stitch through these 2, pick up a bead, stitch through these 2, and up and out. So I'm going to stitch 3, 3, 1, 1. So the first, I'm adding my one side, stitching over to the other side. Then I'm adding that side, so now I have 2 sides of 3. Then I'm stitching and completing by adding this, stitching over and around, and then finally the last one, giving me my cube. As long as I'm stitching a cube on top, I don't need to stitch around here. If I'm done or I'm going to go someplace else, then I need to stitch around these 4. But if I'm doing one on top, then the construction of that next one will zip that top up. So there is an easier way to do cubic right angle weave, and you'll find that it's also much faster. Okay, let's take a look at one of the things, the techniques that you would use right angle weave for, and that's turning corners. So you're going along and you're making your right angle weave, and you want to turn a corner, and so this is This is, all right, so if we're turning a corner, we're going to be going off to the other side. So we're not going to construct another cube on top of this. So the first thing that we need to do is we've finished this up and out, and we need to stitch around the top of this, of the last cube that we've created to complete the stitch. And we have to stitch around the top because we're not putting another cube on top of that. Instead of going up here, we're going to look at where it is that we want to construct the corner. We're going to stitch to that area, and then it's very easy. Instead of this is my bottom 4 as being my bottom, I'm going to define whatever side that I want the corner to come off of. There's my bottom 4. And so the stitch becomes very easy. Here's my bottom 4. I can either start my 3 here or stitch over here and start my 3 here. So it really doesn't matter. The beads I'm using here are 3mm fire polish, simply because it's easier to see and show you what's going on. It's also a great bead to use to learn this stitch and just get real comfortable with it. So then when you switch over to a size 11 seed bead, you're so familiar with what you're going to see and how it works that it's just easier to do. So there's my bottom 4. I put on my 3. I stitched to the opposite side. I'm putting on my 3. Now my last 2 sides where I have to go with 1, so I'm stitching around the bottom, through the bottom, up through that side, picking up my 1, down through the side and bottom of that side of the cube, stitch over to the other side, and I'm repeating that, stitching through these 2, pick up my 1, stitch through these 2, and up and out. Now I'm just on my regular stitch. Turning a corner is super easy because all it is you're looking at, instead of, if I'm continuing here, here's my bottom, I'm redefining which my bottom is, picking one of the sides to be the 4 beads for the bottom. So in this case, or with 11s, and you can kind of see the size difference in the right angle weave. Turning a corner is very easy. Okay, let's look at another thing that we need to do with right angle weave and see how to use our easy method. And that is adding a second row onto a strip of cubic right angle weave. Okay, so the first thing we know is we're not going to construct another cube on the top. Therefore, we have to finish this one by stitching around the top to finish off this last cube. And I'm going to stitch over to the area, wherever it is, that I want to add the second row. So I'm going to turn this way. So here's what we have. We're going to add a second row. Well, we always need to start with the bottom. Well, there's going to be one of our bottom beads, and I'm going to change colors, use a different color on this second row so that you can see it. So the first thing we need to do is to create our bottom. Now we have our bottom, and we go back to our standard stitch. Well, if we look at that, well, the 3 on this side are already created. So I'm just going to stitch to the side opposite, and pick up my 3. So like a lot of stitches where you're adding a second row, it's simply completing, using some of the beads that are in the earlier construction, create part of your stitch. They're already there. So I have my 3, I have my 3. So here I need to stitch through those 2 beads, pick up my 1, I'm stitching through these 2 beads, and then you'll start to see the cube start to take shape. and I have to stitch around the bottom to the other side, stitching through these 2 beads, picking up my 1 and down through that 1, 2, and up and out. So it's very easy. I have not changed this stitch at all. I go to my next one, I say, oh, my 3 are already there. So I go to the opposite side and I pick up my 3. Now I'm ready to do the 1s, stitching through the bottom and the side of this next part of the cube, and the side and the bottom of this. Then you'll see the cube start to, and then we need to stitch over, stitching around the bottom, and repeat that, stitching through these 2, pick up my 1, through these 2, there's one of them, there's the second one, and up and out. So all it is, the only difference is the 3 is already there. There's my bottom 4, the 3's already there, 3 on the opposite side, so the stitch is the same. 3 there, but they're already there, add my 3 here, and then my 1 and 1, and you're up to the next cube. So, adding a second row, pretty easy once you have the standard stitch. Okay, let's look at one last thing that we might want to do with right angle weave, and that is taking one strip and then splitting it apart so that it becomes 2 strips. So in the first part is going to be the same, and so this is where we want to start our split. I'm going to pick up my 3 beads, stitch around, go to the opposite side, and pick up my 3 beads, and go around. Now here's where it gets different. Generally, this is where I would add 1 and 1. So to start my split, I'm going to add, instead of 1 at the top, I'm going to add 2. So other than that, the stitch is the same. But I'm adding 2, stitch around to the other side, go through the bottom and the side of this 4 set. But again, I'm not going to add 1, I'm going to add 2. And down through these 2, and up, and out. So again, it starts out the same. I'm going to add my 3, and I'm going to stitch to the side opposite, going through those 2 and the 1, and I'm going to add my 3, but here's where it gets different. Now I'm going to go through to the center. Instead of just zipping up this side, I'm going now into this, between these 2, and I'm going to add another 3, because this is continuing. I'm creating this split into 2 different ones. Well, there isn't a bead for me to stitch around, so I want my 3 to be in the center here. So I'm just going to go around that to create the 3 in the center. Okay, so now I'm back to kind of a standard thing. I need to add 1, 1, 1, 1. So I go through these 2 and add my 1, and I can stitch over to this next part. Go ahead and add the 1 over here. Okay. Stitching around the bottom to the other side. Go through these two, add my 1, go through these two, add my 1, and up and out. Now what we see is that we have 2 bases of 4. So on this one, I like to do my thread out, so I'm just going to stitch around here to make this easier to see. So I'm going to add my 3, go over here, add my 3 and my 1, 1, and just continue on with this leg of it in my split. And continue on. Then I would be adding another thread or stitching down to continue here. The thing is that that's my 4, and I'm going to add my 3 and add 3 here. So this bead is going to have a wall of 3 for this side of the leg and also a wall of 3 for that side of the leg. So that's how you get your split. Now in terms of something like this, I like to keep how I have my techniques easier. So instead of trying to figure out how to take 2 and combine into 1, I can just start here, split it, take another thread, start here and split it, and then when I get the equal length here, then just join the 2 of these together. And joining one side of right angle weave with then another piece where you're continuing in the same column, you just match them up. And how would that go? Well, you've got this one and this one, so you're adding your 3, but 1 is already there. You go to the other side, add your 3, but the top is already there. Well, the top is there, so just stitch around. All the beads are there, so just stitch around, so you can join 2 strips. That way it's easier to understand just a couple of techniques, but be able to do whatever you want to do. So right angle weave, the easy way.